liberalism's influence on. Now I'll just increase one point. So has come through from theoretical sources, practical sources, and strategic sources. Okay, now I'll first explain theoretical sources, then practical, and then strategic. Theoretical source of liberalism influence is that, as we saw, liberalism's core value is freedom. And freedom is also very important in Islam. Well, liberalism's importance of freedom for liberalism is obvious. Liberalism is a belief in liberal is a person who believes in freedom. It is liberal. The word liberal is derived from the word for freedom. On the Islam, also freedom is important, both from the perspective of belief, because when you accept Islam, it's assumed that you're accepting it freely out of conviction. Otherwise, you are not a Muslim. On the other hand, all Islamic practical injunction, whether they are moral injunctions or legal injunctions, they presume that you are a person is free in her action. So one of the most important aspects, one of the most important condition of taklif or obligation in Islam is freedom. If you are not free, then Islamic morality and Islamic legal injunctions don't apply to you. But the thing is, the Islamic concept of freedom is totally different from, in its conception. Its meaning is totally different from freedom in liberalism. That's one thing. On the other hand, so for example, in Islam, freedom as a condition of belief and action, when we talk about that freedom is a capacity or a factual freedom. On the other hand, in liberalism, freedom is a value. Secondly, even when we talk about value, in Islam, freedom can be regarded as a value in certain aspects, but that value would be instrumental value. It's an instrumental value, it's not a core concept. The core concept is rather the concept of worship, which is totally opposite of the meaning of liberal conception of freedom. Similarly, so in Islam, freedom, even if we take it as a value, has only instrumental value. On the other hand, in liberalism, freedom has intrinsic value, and it is the core concept. On the other hand, in Islam, freedom is not the core concept. The core concept is actually worship, which is the exact opposite of the liberal conception of freedom. But due to these surface similarities, people, due to not understanding liberalism very well, there has been theoretical influence of liberalism because of the similarities in words and concepts, people have assumed that they mean similar thing. So that's one of the things through which liberalism influence have come into Islamic scholarship. And the second reason is the existence of oppression and oppressive regimes and dictatorships in the Muslim world, especially in the Middle East, so-called Middle East anyway. Especially after Nasser's crackdown on Ikhwan al-Muslimin, there has been understandable hatred and aversion of oppression and dictatorships and the longing for freedom from these regimes, and longing for a form of government which is not oppressive. And because liberalism slogan is based on, it is anti-oppression and for freedom, and because of the existence of freedoms and rights in the Western world, it has been natural that Islamic movement and Islamic scholars have been attracted toward liberalism, especially because they don't understand, for example, that freedom in liberalism, freedom, is a value as well as a technology of government, and that technology of government varies according to the conditions. And especially ignoring the fact that this oppression existing in the Muslim world was structurally aided by and sustained by those very liberal regimes where freedoms are supposed to be prevailing. But anyway, that was the second practical lure of liberalism. And this we can see it even today because of the growing oppression again after 9/11 in the Muslim world. Oppression which cannot exist without the new imperial setup. That oppression has made freedom even more attracted toward many Muslim thinkers. Especially in the Arab world, for example. And liberalism and democracy have been seen as anti-oppressive and somehow panacea for the Muslim world. And this ignores the very fact of imperialism, without which this sort of oppression would not exist, would not be able to sustain itself. And for example, if you look at one of the recent books of Dr. Mukhtar Shankiti about the crisis of Islamic constitutionalism in the Islamic civilization, you'll see that book totally ignores the fact of imperialism and blame Muslim dictators and Muslim kings and Muslim, oppressive regimes without contextualizing them in the context of imperialism. And then obviously it sees that oppression as existing on its own, basically. And then with this decontextualization, the liberal regimes existing in the West, supposedly based on freedom, looks charming, and that makes liberalism and democracy and constitutionalism charming, practically charming for the Muslim thinkers. Okay, that's the second fact. Third fact is that during the Cold War, due to actually strategic policies and propaganda of certain Muslim regimes, which are the main agents of imperialism in the Muslim world. For example, Saudi Arabia, they propagandized against Marxism and communism on the basis that Marxism and communism are atheistic movements which are against religion and against Islam, for example. And on that basis, they claim that liberalism is more pro-religion, or at least not anti-religion. And that's why Muslims should be aligned with liberalism. And a lot of Muslim thinkers who were afraid of naked atheism and communist ferociism and hatred of Islam and religion bought into this narrative. And the fact that they didn't understand liberalism very well also played part in that. And due to that fact, liberalism became what we call akhaffu dararain, lesser of two evils, which is not necessarily a correct diagnosis. And even if it is, this can't be, the only aspect or the only factor. And this totally ignores the fact that both liberalism and Marxism stem from the same movement of enlightenment and romanticism and humanism, which is the basis of modernity and modern of basis of modern capitalism and modern capitalist civilization, which replaced Christendom in the in Europe and in the West, and through imperialism, it is doing that, replacing traditional religions in the rest of the world as well. So that is strategy for and propaganda, and the naked atheism and anti-religious stance of Marxism and communism made sure that Muslim scholars have always had a soft corner for liberalism and constitutionalism, and they couldn't. So that's why they didn't study liberalism as one of the most effective movements which has affected the Muslim world and Islamic creed and Islamic practices and